Welcome to Collective Protest and Rebellion, a Black Study intensive by the Center for African American Poetry and Poetics at the University of Pittsburgh. It's here where we consider the proposition that art and poetry and radical writing are revolutionary acts. For certain, it's when we practice in the creative mind that we access a reality unknown to us otherwise. Likewise, it's in the experience of visual art, music, dance, film, narrative, and poetry where our interior spaces are altered, allowing us to enter the world as more compassionate, empathetic beings. We borrow from Fred Moten's notion of study when he says, "We are committed to the idea that study is what you do with other people. It's walking, talking, working, dancing, suffering, some irreducible convergence of all three held under the name of speculative practice." We come together differently now. But so many of us were compelled to enter physical space after weeks of pandemic isolation after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Those protests are Black study. Black study is a deep engagement with others. It's stepping outside of your comfort zone with the kind of courage, as Cornel West says, that looks unflinchingly at catastrophic circumstances and realizes virtues like love and hope and faith. We need speculative practice in order to reach outside of the intolerable and intractable present toward the future we deserve. We are excited to be in community with you. Welcome to our second evening of the CAP Black Study Intensive, Collective Protest and Rebellion. I'm Dawn Lundy Martin. I'm the director of CAP, and I'm also a poetry professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm joined here with the co-creator of these events, novelist, professor in the writing program, Angie Cruz.
I'm so thrilled to welcome you to tonight's event, Looking for Language in the Ruins, with poet, performer, composer Jerome Ellis, cultural historian and writer Saidiya Hartman, and poet scholar Erica Hunt.
Me too. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm really excited to find out. Composer, poet, and performer Jerome Ellis's work explores blackness, dysfluency, and music as forces structured by and that rearrange time. Conventional notions of time and time limits, says Ellis, assume that people have relatively equal access to time through their speech. Saidiya Hartman's innovative cultural histories investigate the precarity of Black life as she tells the stories of the unknown, the dispossessed, and the disposable. Using a mode she invented called critical fabulation, Hartman creates the space for a new kind of knowing. Erica Hunt's poetry and prose makes starkly present the polarization of the world and how the quotidian language, the language of the state, and the language of the media shrink our imaginations. What can save us? In Hunt's case, writing on the edge of language or from the corner of the eye provides an urgent other knowing from the cracks in America's broken rhetoric.
But before we move to tonight's program, we want to thank everyone that made this evening possible.
Thank you. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to the Dietrich School especially. We will lead with Jerome's compositions, Saidiya's next, and then Erica. Erica's also going to be the moderator for these events, so she'll be asking questions and engaging in conversation and making sure that happens. A Q&A will follow. Please use the chat function while the event is happening so you can be in conversation with each other and with the topics that our fabulous panelists bring up. And if you want to ask a question, hit the Ask a Question button.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for joining us. Welcome, Jerome, Saidiya, and Erica.
Stoppage, thence passage, thence stoppage, thence passage, thence stoppage, thence passage, thence stoppage, thence passage. I believe in impediment. I believe in the immediate. I believe in giving away impediment. I believe in also he has a black crab in his speech. The crab has lost. The crab secures proof of being above. If the above being is impediment, being is apprehending, being is bushy, being is a chronicle. Years apprehending the fire. I am last, not lost. Impediment is a sawyer in the bay. The northward horse in a chariot of coffee. The reward shall scar the demand. Where is the horse? Where is the horse? Where is the goal of the law of speech? The law pretends to stutter. The law pretends to stutter. The stutter is coffee for the runaways. The stutter is reward The stutter is passage. The stutter is a high chariot. The stutter is a scarlet speech. The stutter is a house for speech. The stutter is a horse for speech. The stutter has run away from any government. Stoppage, thence passage, thence stoppage, thence passage.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm Erica Hunt. Good evening, everyone. And I'm here just to welcome and to invite Jerome into a conversation about these beautiful images that you've presented to us. So evocative and such contrasts there between the person who tries to make a way in a box and then a saxophone in the air, as if in flight, bird flight, right? And then Henry Box Brown, too, I brought to mind for me. So Jerome, tell us more about this beautiful film.
Hi, Erica. Thank you very much. Thank you for your words. I'll start first by just saying a few words about my stutter, how it manifests. What the way it usually manifests is that I just stop speaking and a sort of silence takes over, and sometimes my body freezes. And I say that because over the internet, when I'm speaking with people over video, it can seem like the internet has dropped or something, which it does sometimes. But so everybody knows that, and yeah, and I also think about lately. I think about moments of silence and how in our culture we use moments of silence often to reflect or to remember or honor those who are no longer with us or those who are suffering. And so I invite you all in the audience, when I am stuttering, you can treat it also, if you want, as a moment of silence, and you can use that however you like. I also want to just thank Dawn and Cap and all the organizations and sponsors that made this possible. I feel profoundly honored being here with you, Erica. And Saidiya shortly. Well, this life of life when I started making it, I wanted to be in dialogue with you two, and I was guided by two lines from your works. Your line, enthusiasm has its own physics, and Saidiya's line, the opacity of Black song. And I wanted to make something that that kind of existed in between and around those words from you two, which have been so inspiring for me, and guiding. And I wanted to work with Alice Shepard, this wonderful artist, and I'm so grateful for her and our collaboration. The collaboration, I think, is ongoing. I think this little film that we just saw is just the first installment in a way. And I wanted to work with her for several reasons, including because we have, I feel, such affinity with her on so many levels, but including the fact that we both identify as disabled, and I wanted to think about fugitivity as well as protest and rebellion, not just from a Black perspective and a Black study perspective, but from a disability, a perspective. And Emily Greenwood used this phrase last night in the event with Dion Brand and Harriet Mullen, which was overwhelming for me, and how beautiful the whole event was. Emily Greenwood used this phrase, a fugitive study, and to me that really resonated with me and with this, what Alice and I are exploring in this work. For me, a question that I've had lately is the stutter a form of fugitive speech? Not just because it feels like when I'm stuttering that my voice leaves me, escapes, but also that the stutter itself feels to me like it escapes certain norms and structures and strictures of speech and verbal exchange. So I've been thinking about that, and the two newspaper advertisements in the piece, they are from the archive of so-called runaway slave advertisements that appeared in newspapers in the US, in the UK, in the Caribbean, Latin America, where a master or someone on behalf of a master would place an ad with a description of what they envisioned was their property who had run away, and there's information about a reward, and there's such a level of detail that they try to give as much detail as possible to to really ensure that the person is captured. And I've been working with only advertisements that mention slaves who stutter or stammer, who have impediments or stoppages in their speech, as a way of, for me, kind of engaging in a kind of an ancestral practice, engaging with my ancestors, not just my enslaved ancestors, but because stuttering is hereditary and I inherited my stutter from my mother. I enter this space where I feel like I'm able to communicate with my ancestors in a way, especially the ads that I have found from Jamaica. In the video in Life of Life, the first ad is from Jamaica, and the second one is from Pennsylvania, and the Jamaica ones are particularly intense for me because my mother is from Jamaica, and when I'm engaging with those, I feel that there is, it's a very small chance, but there's a chance that one of those fugitives who stutter, who are described in the ads, that they could be a blood relative of mine, if not a spiritual relative, and so what my practice has been is that every day I write out one of these advertisements by hand, and I then write lyrics and lines by rearranging the words in the ads. And so all the lyrics in the video are use words that come from the ads. And of course, this is directly inspired by M. Bessie Phillips' Zong and her method there. And all these forms of meaning arise from a document whose purpose was, extremely utilitarian and violent. Had to sneeze, went away. To find what else is there. And you and I and Saidiya, we had a conversation where we were talking about tense and time. And she used the phrase of the tenses of struggle. And we talked about your poem, Surplus, Future, Imperfect, and, engaging with this material, I've been thinking about the imperfect as a form of the past that is unfinished or is ongoing. Because to me, what becomes clear when I engage with these ads is that what seemed to be a done deal, that like the ad was placed and that's it, and it lives in the newspaper, is revealed to me to be, in fact, that the ad is unfinished, and rather the forms of meaning and what the language is doing there to me is unfinished. Because then, if you can rearrange things and find new meanings, then you open up what seems to be closed. Is the feeling that I often have there. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot more I could say, but I'll stop there for now. Oh, I think you're muted, Erica.
Thank you for that film and for those remarks about that, your work there. They really help us. they help us think about how to make something valuable for us in the present out of something, almost dead to us, right? So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce now Saidiya Hartman, who is a scholar and a writer and a thinker who's had tremendous influence on Black study for poets and for visual artists and so forth. Someone else who has taken dead letters and made them live through what Saidiya calls critical fabulation, but also she says, what is the history of the present? And have we looked, and can we look deeply enough into what seems like the catacombs? Can we go into the administrative archive and find something of use there that helps us, brings us fuel for the present? And so I'm so happy to be sharing space and time with both Jerome and Saidiya. And I want to invite her.
Hi.
It is. Hey.
It's great to be here, and I look forward to the conversation we'll have afterwards. So I really want to thank Dawn and Angie for gathering us at this moment in time. And I have an offering, which is a rant. So I'll just share that and talk about it afterwards. So this is: Pro Jane makes a modest proposal for improving race relations and saving U.S. empire. She doesn't say the sun's gonna shine in her back door someday, or croon, sometimes I feel like a motherless child a long way from home. But she does assure us that the sun will come up in the morning. She humbly proposes her own thoughts for saving democracy itself. Regarding these matters, she proffers a remedy for what can't be repaired, all the while explaining why we are compelled to wait, extolling us to believe what we cannot any longer. She is confident that this remarkable journey that we as Americans are on will go on. Eternal dreams are as unstoppable as wars without end. She coaxes, we are all on the same team until we are not, until democracy itself is on trial. It is this presumption of good faith that makes our democracy exceptional and has allowed us to move forward since 1619. Even a word as anemic as justice isn't forthcoming. In her thoughts on the matter of a solution to the problem and a plan for reform, just threadbare homilies about lesser evils, pragmatic actions, and realist solutions, cautionary remarks about imminent dangers, a trove of ready advice and DIY instructions for the best ways not to smell shit, even when we are knee-deep in it, performatives for continuing to believe in the nation, our democracy, despite everything we know and all that we have lived. America is beautiful, exceptional, and she believes she can rescue it. At least 62% of white nationalists might still be converted, as if there is an antidote for the transubstantiation of the poor white into planter, oligarch, and state executioner. a corrective for every white citizen who has internalized the power of the police, as if the plot against America isn't America. Crow Jane's lecture is a composition deracinated from the field and choked with promises of state and civility. It is reasoned, measured, not strident, so as to ensure the willingness to listen on the part of those who aren't inclined to listen to any truths dropped from her lips and who prefer conversation without discomfort. Yes, they are accustomed to dictating the terms of address, but in her case, they prove willing to suspend, if only temporarily, the rules of engagement, the visceral disbelief in her worldview, to cede to the native informant's predictable and determined chains of meaning. Like the quiet storm, her modest proposal is easy listening, nothing but legible speech without discordant tones or ugliness. It is assimilable, digestible, the reassuring comfort of the familiar, mammy fascism, statecraft in black and brown face. No hue and cry, no fuck it or burn it down, just this talent for becoming anything or nothing at all, just reproductive labor in service of racial capitalism, just the dulcet tones of a pledge of submission, a vow to wait, to keep waiting, waiting until oblivion. Father, may I, Master, may I, which is so much better than allegiance. Crow Jane, how you sound, just how they like it, sassy and revanchous, how she gets them off so easily in conversation, service by the hour or the term or the life sentence. She sound devoted, like a martyr for America, like a woman waiting to get paid, like she's on the clock for the project, like declaration and allegiance are slave play, like we have all the time in the world, like 12 years a slave, like 12 years left to save the earth isn't the beginning and the end of things, like she can change the world, one white mind at a time. Dear white people, the mantra that might save us, like the hustle and the bookless is Black study, like pimp slapping your girlfriend is the threshold to enlightenment and renouncing hip hop, like she isn't barricaded in her father's house practicing piano concertos as ordinary folks die for the vote, like we fools, like we stupid and don't know that reform is a synonym for fascism, like the damned of the earth can live on promises and symbols this late in the day, or be moved by earnest confessions and the gilded beauty of Negro elites, by the pornography of Black abjection and the bling bling of up from slavery narratives, by vows and assurances of betterment and one day soon, by learned discourse, by the hermeneutic circle and communicative rationality, by the polis and the agora, by radical empathy, by constituent power, by insights honed in conversation with titans of industry and the G7, billionaires and their factotums, philanthropists and diversity officers, all of this as preamble and prelude to why we are compelled to wait. The melodic tones of her voice, submission as sweet as molasses, the whispered insistence on patience, the resignation to a higher, whiter power, the comfort of soporifics, battle hymns about duty and patriotism, Jeremiads about the city on the hill, our American democracy, the content of our character, the origins of our discontent. Our dreams are red, white, and blue too. We are the true Americans. Crow Jane, how you sound. The space between a rock and a hard place ain't home. The fault line between disaster and catastrophe provides no refuge. Kittens born in the oven aren't biscuits. Crow Jane, how you sound, the poet asks. But which nation ever said of you, she is human? So what allegiances do you have, temporary and provisional, whatever? You try to fit in to your own demise. You rode shotgun to your own disaster. Crow Jane, how you sound, the Reverend Doctor asks. We have waited for 100 years. Mutual aid, direct action, and inciting crisis will open the door to change, not law and order, not the party of the rich, but an international association for the advancement of creative maladjustment. Crow Jane, how you sound, the singer asks. Your democracy is killing me. Crow Jane takes to the podium like a fish to water, like a devoted servant in the house. She is no Red Peter compelled to account for his appearance before the Academy, offering a personal history of captivity and cruelty, negotiating the gulf between himself and man. Her speech is devoted to policing the crisis and averting the present dangers. Impaired citizenship is no obstacle or impediment to faith in the founding fathers. The murder of her sister and the sentencing of her brother instill no doubts. Her faith is unwavering. She waits and waits and waits and waits, never despairing, leading by example, explicating tirelessly. She assures us we won't have to wait forever. We just have to wait long enough to get this old white man into office, long enough to count the ballots, long enough to quell impending dangers, long enough to lure the nationalists and the patriots, the soccer moms and the swing voters, long enough to condemn the abolitionists, the far left, the Black radicals and anarchists, and win over the center right, long enough to secure late liberalism and quash all talk of anti-fascism, anti-capitalism, anti-Blackness, anti-colonialism, and ecocide, long enough to stabilize and subsidize the markets and save the banks, long enough for surveillance capitalism to make citizens and elections redundant, long enough for data points to cultivate outcomes, anticipate desire, and produce thought, exploit want, exalt and intensify the illusory autonomy of the consumer's I and me, long enough to create new incentives for accumulating wealth and evading taxes, long enough for a more brutal regime of deprivation, long enough to make our cities safer, long enough to reform the police, long enough to make live and let die. Crow Jane condemns the looters and rioters, the free issue niggers, the arsonists who burn the precinct, who deface the proclamation, who say fuck free papers. The intended audience cheers. The convention hall rings with applause, shouts of praise, high fives, and awkward fist bumps. The ones clapping and heaping on the praise, the members of the assembled body, the convention, the faculty senate, the true objects of her address, despite the talk of her son, her nephew, her cousin Pookie. They don't ask, what is it, when she is within earshot, or laugh at the ungainly sight of her in the flesh-colored suit, the body bag so unkind to the darker races. They don't look askance at her large, rough hands, thick wrists, and broad shoulders, or joke that there is nothing, absolutely nothing petite or diminutive about her. No negrita or little lady wouldn't want to drown in that hole. They chuckle and wink behind her back. Man to man, they concede, wanting to do her brother too. Discourse on the incitement of pendulous breasts. Stiato Pagia or not, blonde wig or not. Like Jefferson, they disavow the want of the very thing loath. Orangutans prevaricate in notes on the state of Virginia. the rapturous dalliances of predator presidents and founding fathers. Rapists lie like hell in the State of the Union. Senators deny and disavow the monstrous intimacies of Thurman, the threnodies for dead slave girls at the Planters Club, swear on their mama's grave to be loyal to the cause in the anti-miscegenation filibuster. Crow Jane smiles, despite the black eye, the swollen lips, the blood filling her mouth, as she endeavors to subdue the boys will be boys, disarm her handlers, her colleagues, her allies, her neighbors, as if a bright smile or choked laughter might provide a solvent against hate, goad indifference into affection, transform negation into recognition, make analogy out of antagonism. How might she rearrange their desire? How might she change their mind about her or anything else? In a moment of panic, she wants to retract everything. Get me out of this now, but how? Bolt from the podium. There is nowhere to run and hide, so she catches her breath and proceeds ahead, exhausted and foul, humbled with gratitude, earnest. She laughs at herself with deliberate expedience. She laughs exquisitely. She goes high when they go low. She reiterates the pledge, I am not trying to reconstruct anything. Crow Jane, how you sound. The MPhil in critical race theory asks, have you ever thought about destituent power and unlearning imperialism, or the end of the world as beginning? Why do you want to coddle white folks and hold their hands? Why do you want to rehabilitate the settler? Have you read Black Reconstruction, or We Charge Genocide, or Wretched of the Earth, or Return to the Source, or Black Metamorphosis? Are you aware of the resonance between lactification and annihilation, or the way your desire yields to our destruction? Crow Jane plays the part, the vainglorious servant in the house, shucking and jiving, not putting on old master, but dissembling before us, trying to teach field Negroes the meaning of hegemony and its possibilities, how the plantation belongs to us too, how one day we might inherit it. After the lesson, she kicks it with the master, downing a glass of his best bourbon in one swallow, her diamond earrings and over-the-knee patent leather boots incongruous with the Osnaburg dress and the indigo head rag covering her plaits. Looking every inch the part, a planter's pinup, the B&D imago, the role play, the frightened, humiliated nigger trembling in front of the white master, or the rebellious slave in need of correction. She can play the part as well as her brothers. In moonlight, it can't be denied. How dark and lovely, how radiant the exemplary slave. When Crow Jane restates it, the plan for our obliteration sounds like a promise to do right by us, like a proclamation of eventually all persons held as, with all deliberate speed, in due time, shall be then, thenceforth, and forever, except as punishment for crime. She has been listening to them for so long that she thinks like they do, rationalizing death, apportioning blame, imploring us to do better, berating the unhoused and the impoverished for not getting their shit together, explaining away each and every tragedy until the last Black woman disappears, a quiet extinction like bees and whales and insects and polar bears, a slow death. It is a tragedy, Crow Jane concedes, but who is to bear the blame? Aren't we the agent and the executioner? Why love a hood rat? Why get tied up with a drug dealer? We are guilty, she explains, because of who we love and how we live. Guilty because the decent reside with the criminal. Crow Jane cautions us to be reasonable. pleads with us not to rush out, not to burn, loot, and destroy. Van Jones cries on the Jumbotron and asks us to weigh it carefully, the legal facts versus our narrative, to make a choice, the state or our sister. We grieve and break the law, make claim only to the dead. We honor them because our very lives depend on it, because our freedom hangs in the balance. We will not fall into line or stay in our place or assuage our loss with empty slogans and symbolic pledges. We will not accept that our lives are disposable or resign ourselves to the inevitable death that awaits us. Mad as hell, mad as love, we try to live.
Oh my gosh. I'm in that space right now where I experienced something like my heart was calm before you started reading, Saidiya. And I entered that space when I encounter language by a thinker and artist that just affects my entire body. And I really want to thank you for creating this work and sharing it with us today. Last night, one of the conversations was about the redemptive possibilities for language. And it's not like you can put a meta kind of, language to the redemptive possibilities. When you're in the presence of those redemptive possibilities, I think you just experience it, and we just experienced that. So I really want to thank you, and I want to thank Jerome, which brings me to a kind of question of the redemptive possibilities of time. Saidiya, your reinvention of what it means to do cultural theory and cultural history has been important to so many of us. I think that it's like what it looks like. What you do is what it looks like when the darkness of whiteness is no longer the lens through which the work is done. So thank you very much.
That's a great compliment. Thank you.
And now I will invite my friend and collaborator, Erica Hunt, to join the screen. Erica, all of my students know this, that the first way that I encountered your work, and you know this too, but the rest of the folks watching all over the world don't know this, was through your essay, the amazing essay, Notes for an Oppositional Poetics. And it's the piece that really got me thinking really seriously for the first time I was in first year in graduate school about not only the power of language to repress, but the power of innovation to do something to that repression, to do something to that language that has the power to subjugate. So I want to thank you for that. And now we turn to Erica Hunt and her remarks.
Thanks. Hi again. I'm grateful to Dawn Lundy Martin and to Stefan Trippett and to the Angie Cruz for this opportunity to speak with you, to muse publicly Black study at this point and at this point in time, and this topic of language from the ruins. And like, what do we do as people who work with language, are interested in words, and what can they offer to us as tools of some sort to get through the present time? So I've got 6 slides, and I just want to go through them very, language in the ruins. So I've subtitled this, The Performance of Hope in the Face of Catastrophe. And I guess what I mean by the performance of hope, it's been a phrase that stayed with me, has been with me for a while. And what I mean by performance is, performance in the sense of performative, but also in the sense of rehearsal. And this idea that we don't actually know quite what even hope is or what survival is, but we have to practice somehow something that Saidiya, for instance, gives us a way of reading and of reading the past in order for us to kind of practice not only what happened in the past, but to kind of bring it into the present as present tools, present, a way out of no way that we can use to survive what could only be the apocalypse, the end of their world, perhaps the beginning of ours. I've been thinking about the performance of hope in the context of the apocalypse, how the end of the world has been on repeat, certainly for African descended people, for indigenous North Americans. The end of the world came and somehow was survived, if just barely. And then connected to that thought is that the end of the world may be a necessary thing if it means the end of white supremacy and patriarchy. The performance of hope in the face of catastrophe is an aesthetic practice, a practice combining theory and practice in which performance and rehearsal are linked. For instance, we don't entirely know what it is to live in a democracy in which every person is ascribed dignity, that they're human and seen as human. The social order suppresses our imagination and attempts as it can. It contains us, like that box again, schooling, employment conditions, faith institutions. They are involved in enforcing limit, in policing us, in incarcerating us, in extinguishing the diversity of life experiments that generate democratic possibility for free Black people. So the heuristic of performance and practice gifts us with something, using our minds, our bodies, hearts, and imagination to enact and create situations, encounters, improvisations that call from us the sociality we dream of. It's like practicing the muscles we will need to cultivate the new ground in which we can breathe. So what about those words, though, hope and catastrophe, in the same phrase, yoked in dialectic and manic dance? Hope is a noun and often a verb that dares or is deluded or diluted. Catastrophe is a threat. It's calamity weaponized, a tragic noun. It's only that link to performance, that phrase that retains a shred of agency. She, I, we, Don, rehearse a self, ourselves, finding a way out of no way. Haven't you and I seen the no way? Finding ourselves in the box, discovering a means out of the box, out of the loophole of retreat in captivity or towards a freer state, finding a way out of no way, a semblance of getting free. Next slide, please. This is an image that has been with me for a while. I've kept it. It's by Simone Lee and Chitra Ganesh. Its title is borrowed from a Gwendolyn Brooks poem. My dream, my works must wait till after hell. I've had this image in a folder for several years now, and I'm drawn to return to it because it fuels in me this feeling of strength and resilience and obliteration, of buried life, fragility. It maps the unyielding facts on the ground with which Black women contend in order to get out of bed, morning after morning, day after day, month after month, year after year, trying to overcome the feeling of being smothered. One digs oneself out, unburies the brilliance, or leaves it buried, an unremarked feat of endurance. Except for the blood pressure and the diabetes, the eating, the drinking, the smoking, the drugging, all the means of self-medication that enables everyday John Henryism. This image says so much. Let's look at the Gwendolyn Brooks poem. Next slide. My dreams, my works must wait till after hell. I hold my honey and I store my bread in little jars and cabinets of my will. I label clearly, and each latch and lid I bid be firm till I return from hell. I am very hungry. I am incomplete, and none can tell when I may dine again. No man can give me any word but wait, the puny light. I keep eyes pointed in, hoping that when the devil days of my hurt drag out to their last dregs, and I resume on such legs as are left me, in such heart as I can manage, remember to go home. My taste will not have turned insensitive to honey and bread. Old purity could love. A few words about this. It's a 14-line sonnet with off rhymes between bread and lid, will and hell, incomplete and wait, again in hurt, heart, resume home. And the last two lines, the volta, off rhymes insensitive and love. These pairs, especially those between will and hell, incomplete and wait, again in, and especially hurt and heart, intensify the feelings and thoughts of this poem, the will to get through hell, or waiting, its temporal lock on the present, forever postponing the fullness of a life, the lives we deserve. Wait. Other pairs, honey and bread, sweetness and sustenance. Bread you live by colloquially, but not alone. Honey makes that eating sweet, connects the tongue to brain, to happy stomach and feet, soothes the throat and unleashes the voice, activates the body, energizes it. Jars and cabinets. Jars, cabinets, the lids and latches represent the simple furniture of domesticity. Little jars and cabinets of my will, I label clearly our intentions, conveying the power of naming and self-determination. But the means of life are locked away, aren't they? Be firm till I return again. Hell, from hell. Hungry, incomplete. I am very hungry. I am incomplete, and none can tell when I may dine again. This life on hold, its sweetness and sustenance are on pause. Might as well be dead. No man can give me any word but wait, might as well be dead. The puny light, don't you feel those words, especially now, when we wait, we're told wait, wait. Wait. I keep my eyes pointed in, hoping that when the devil days of my hurt drag out to their last dregs and I resume. I think that cliffhanger space blank beside the words I resume. When do I resume? When? We hold our breaths. I can't breathe. How can we wait? Because when is it that we or I or you resume or not? Legs and heart. On such legs as are left me, in such heart as I can manage, remember to go home. Striking, isn't it, to remember to go home, as if we have that loss of markers, memory, the challenge of preserving space of mind or time to create or maintain home. In those final lines, my taste will not have turned insensitive to honey and bread, old purity could love. You know, those two lines could be a dissertation. I won't do that, but Think about that. That old purity, that something has been lost, our affections, proclivities, even a sense of self-determination has been altered, such that even honey and bread can lose their savor. So let's go back, next slide, to the language. Language in the ruins. Next slide, please. Poetics of the archive. So this section takes up the threads of my inventive co-panelists, Jerome and Saidiya, and they've asked us to consider the archive and strategies for unlocking the lives of African descended people from its muffled quality, its abdications of the administrative archive, its dodging, its silences, its cementing over the facts of our brutal arrival to the Americas, its iron fist of laws, its policies, attitudes, and ideology that have dimmed our light and shortened our lives. My dear friend Tanya Foster says of the archive that it contains the language that lay ruin to our lives. The language that lay ruin to our lives. By such language, lives have been lost, erased, and destroyed. Last year, I taught a course called Writing from the Archives, and my goal was to create a community of learning for my students and myself about the host of literary strategies aimed at revisiting archive, but also not only the administrative archive, but also the literary record, the canon. I wrote in the syllabus, is it possible to imagine the texture of these lives even when they are omitted from the accepted record? Are there psychological, emotional, situational, or linguistic resonances retrievable for making works of literary art in the present? What poems are possible from a footnote? We read Saidiya Hartman's Venus in Two Acts, and also her magisterial work, Wayward Lives, and John Keene's Counter Narratives, and Avery Gordon's The Hawthorne Archive, and of course, M. Nurbesi Phillips' Zong. We also read Layli Long Soldier, Whereas, and Solmaz Sharif, Look, and Robin Cost Lewis's Voyage of the Sable Venus. I am so grateful to these writers who have retrieved for us the history of the present. We learned from them and were in readerly dialogue with writers who have engaged the historical record as well as classic texts to break the silences, using strategies of counter-narrative, critical fabulation, and reparative technique. Language from the ruins suggests that we do have possible means for retrieving potential histories and potential futures, but that's not to say it is easy. It is in fact very, very difficult. It requires courage and discernment. It is a disentombment. It is a disentombment. It is not the record, but the silenced record one seeks to resuscitate. The lives, the archives, language laid into ruin. We learn to read, and though through what's left, we learn to read all over again, learning to read as if for the first time, recognizing that we will have to read many times, and each time with a different inflection. Just as when we read a Gwendolyn Brooks poem, we read her poem of then and also now, in this time, to find the news as recent as the acquittal of the officers involved in the death of Breonna Taylor, as if Gwendolyn Brooks had placed all the peers in her poem in case we needed to find it again. Next slide. This final image of braided hair adorned by red pigeon peas, a variety only grown in West Africa, is my mnemonic to remind me to remain attentive to the living and speaking archive that may not be in a document written by a slaveholder, that it is placed in jars and cabinets of my will, yet labeled clearly, waiting. It is a written record of sorts, carried in gesture and expression. That lifting voice of Aretha Franklin and Amazing Grace, who got it from Clara Ward, who got it from who gave it to Fontella Bass, who got it from Mahalia Jackson, who got it and transformed it from Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey and so on, each person altering the sound to be in their bodies in order to linking them to the past, the present to us, and to show us how to be ourselves, themselves, savoring the honey, savoring the bread. Those peas, that's an ornament, flashes of color and swinging braids catching the light of the sun. The peas began as seeds of hope brought by Africans kidnapped, raped, mutilated, so many tossing their bodies into the sea, asking the ancestors to remember them, to assist them in walking back home. The people who were enslaved and brought to South Carolina similarly braided rice into their hair, smuggled the rice into their garments to bring with them across the sea into a strange land. That Carolina rice is the archive, slowly being written, but also recorded, told, and read. We are called to use our poetic ingenuity to call these lives out into language, to mark the places where they lived, and just as difficultly, to respect its blanks. Thank you. Hey.
Hey. Hey.
So happy to be here with you too.
Yes.
The feeling's mutual.
Yes. Such an interesting conversation, I think, to be had here with among us and also with the audience. And I wanted to just kind of open this up a little bit and talk about, well, I mean, do you think you can really, do you think that there's something that we're retrieving from a footnote, from a detail, from a language? And what are those languages? And can we enter into that? And can we come back somehow from the land of the dead? And is it not dead? Big question. But hopefully that provokes something for you each. Whoever would like to jump in.
It sent me the question in a way to different directions, because I think like Jerome, you have this great line, a stutter is like a horse and a stutter runs away from government. And so part of the spirit of my rant was to try to introduce a stutter into legible political speech, right? To run away from government through a certain citation of it. And I was really just moved, Erica, when you were talking about Tanya's description of the archive as containing the language that lays us to ruin. And I think that that's also something I was thinking about with this imposition of a certain framework of political legibility. The terms are dictated. We can't think outside of them. But that language actually lays ruin to our life, lays ruin to Black life. So I guess there's the inadvertent formal reanimation of something when you reiterate it, but I wanted to think about it as a kind of ruined state, and that there's no food or possibility for us there in that imposed conception of meaning and possibility and legibility in those political norms.
Yeah, I felt that as soon as you began and you said he said Crow Jane, and I was immediately thinking of the reversal and the power of the reversal. And as you were speaking throughout, I was thinking about reversal and what happens when you are hearing something and it's backwards. You know, it's not what you are used to hearing. I think, Erica, of what you were just saying about the rice as the archive and the pigeon peas and the braid, to me there's something there too about as you were saying, Saidiya, legibility, that the white person looking at the braids, they may think that the P is a bead, or they may not even be able to even identify the P and identify the seed. To me, there's a great power in being illegible and forcing illegibility into legibility.
There's a multiplicity of readings that is the gift of this, which is that this is what the record says, and it's mute on us. It's always silenced about us. But the rereading and the reading into and the imagining and the critical fabulation and the looking harder, maybe it isn't even words, maybe it's a gesture, you know, is actually what is what fuels us. It teaches us something, you know, is something that is of use to us. It's our rereading, not our reading as you know, as it is conventionally taught, as we are taught to see ourselves and taught to read ourselves in the record, but somehow saying that we have the power of its transformation, of its transmutation into something they never intended for us to see in it. Never. And that, to me, is sort of what language from the ruins, or language in the ruins, points to, which is that even from what they said, we'll never feed you, because it was never supposed to feed you, it wasn't meant for you. Somehow we are able to reread and extract something that is completely vital from us, for us. And so that's why I am so grateful always for how you think and how both of you think and maneuver in these spaces that were supposed to be open and shut.
Yeah.
Not shut at all. Not shut at all. Another question.
Please.
It's destabilizing it, right? It's destabilizing, meaning destabilizing. So I want to talk a little bit about that too. Jerome. So, you know, I kept thinking I just read all about William Box Brown and how he was put in a 2 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot box and shipped from Virginia to Philadelphia. He got there in one day. It was considered a miracle of the post office. And they tossed him about. Did that cross your mind? Any of that?
It did. And it was Alice's idea to dance in the box and to film herself dancing in the box. And as soon as she told me that idea, or not as soon as, but shortly after she told me that idea, I thought about him as well. And she and I have been talking about monasticism and cells and the kind of paradox of searching for a certain kind of liberty within an enclosure. And there's something to me too about this question of the image again of the rice and the peas and the image of a seed itself, that the seed is also a very tight space that contains everything inside of it. And when Alice sent me the video of her dancing, I was so struck by, the expansiveness of the forest as the frame of the box, and I remember I watched this event with you, Saidiya, and Fred Moten at Duke, and there's this passage that has really stuck with me, where you both were talking about what does it mean to find an outside within an inside. When you are in the hold of the ship, and assuming that we are on one level still in the hold, what does it mean to search for an outside there? So I also think about that with Henry Box Brown, and of course the loophole of retreat and the garret, I think all those layers are there.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that even in terms of, the title, like, stoppage and passage. So this, movement between arrest and movement, fugitivity and enclosure. And I think what was so very powerful about watching Alice in the Box is precisely, look what happens inside that enclosure. Look what happens in that amazingly restricted space, right? That there's something that that is made there too, right? So it's, a box is uninhabitable, but so how do you make a beautiful dance inside of it? And so that was just really, lovely. I mean, one of the things that came up in that conversation with, Fred was also thinking about these practices of maroonage, where people fled the plantation, but not to form a great state or not to kind of leave in an absolute way, but to maybe leave for a few days or to live on the outskirts of the plantation and, but without leaving these signs of human habitation. And thinking about that again as, a really important ethics and something that we can take, up in our practice now. So all of those resources, all of those critical tools, all of that beauty, all of that music, all of that language that comes from, what can't be born, that situation of captivity, of being held, whether in the ship, in the plantation, or today held in the body of the state. So I that was just so powerful in the work.
So I like this idea of, I want to reintroduce my idea of rehearsal, and that when we let everything be determined by the hold we're in, that even the most minute, we let it limit us. There's ways that we are limited by certainly by institutional, kinds of constraints and rules and regulations, and how certain kinds of utterances can be produced, and how things get published, how we exchange, and somehow it limits what can happen. And so I want to introduce this notion of practice and rehearsal of something that is not, that seems to be outside of, in a way, it's a marriage of a different sort. It's like, what would it mean to sort of practice with each other outside of certain kinds of institutional holds? And what does that mean? What would that suggest to you for Black study and for Black practice that leads us, past this impasse?
Yeah. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
I don't know. I'm asking you. I mean, in some ways, Crow Jane, by the way, Crow Jane is a song. Right.
Crow Jane is a Muddy Waters song. The suite of those Crow Jane poems by Baraka and the lecturer. And Crow Jane is a way of really thinking about the centrality of the Black femme to this like brutal racialized formation that we're living in. And so it was Baraka, and there are two really important books. One is like by Zakiya Iman Jackson, that's called Becoming Human, and it's really thinking about these issues of not simply the ontological negation of Blackness, but its plasticity, what it affords. And it feels that the way in which our creative labors and capacities are constantly called upon is to reproduce this order that we're constantly conscripted to make our capacities available for that, and wanting to say no. And Erica Edwards has a forthcoming book called The Other Side of Terror, and really thinking about Black women's role in in the Cold War and neoliberalism, and in assuming forms of state power. And so it's like, so what are our aspirations? What are our wants? Do we want to be inheritors of the big house? Or do we want a world?
What do we,
where the big house isn't something that we can imagine, at all. Certainly it wouldn't be something that we would desire. So I don't know, there are different kinds of repetition. I mean, there's that the recurrences and changing same of rehearsal, and then there's a kind of structural violence, which seems to be about these recurrences, like not being able to escape or break a cycle. And I don't know. I mean, I just oscillate in the zone between rage and grief these days, and I just feel so enraged that that I am being forced to, quote unquote, enact a choice that's not a choice at all, right? And Black women in particular are being asked to be involved in a certain kind of labor in maintaining and reproducing, law and order and the state. And it is utterly maddening. Thus my rave.
Got you. Have company. Jerome.
Something I also think about is I was just gonna say on rehearsal, it's I wrote down what you said, with that, what you're talking about, rehearsing what hope might be. I work a lot in theater, and so rehearsal is like a very daily fact of my life, though it hasn't been since March. But I also think about, I love to blur the lines between what is the performance and what is the rehearsal, because often my favorite performances are at the rehearsal. Like I have many friends who are in theater, and they'll invite me to a rehearsal, and I'll sit and I'll watch the performance, and to me that was the thing, and I don't need to go and see the official thing. So I the first music I studied as a musician was jazz, and I think the way rehearsing often works in jazz is very, very interesting too. Is like sometimes you don't rehearse, or that when you're on the stage at the club, like that's simultaneously the rehearsal,
yes,
and the performance, and there's an intimacy to inviting the audience into the space of improvisation, and saying like we're all rehearsing here in the same room, and that the musicians need the audience as much as the audience needs musicians, and it's not that we went and rehearsed here and now we're here and we're gonna perform. So I like to, when I was listening to you speak earlier, I was thinking about the ways that I felt that you two were blurring the lines between what is a performance, what is rehearsal.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that element of how it's a collaborative process. It's a collective process. It's not just like individuals practicing, but it's something that happens because there's an interaction between there's some kind of conversation that's going on, and it's also improvised in that moment, right? It's not.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're supposed to take audience questions. Is that right? Okay, there are some questions that are coming. Let's see. It's a question for Jerome. How do you apply that concept of rearranging speech and time to musical composition? Where do you get musical inspiration?
Well, thank you for the question. And specifically in Life of Life, it's very relevant to what we were talking about with seeds earlier. So the music there's sort of two main layers. The music, there's sort of the underlying layers that some sound like an organ at times, and then there's the saxophone and my voice on top. And the underlying layers I created using a specific process called it's called well, the word, it doesn't want to sound itself right now, so I'm going to let it be. But what the process is on my computer, I have a program where I can import audio, and I can turn the audio into tiny snippets of sound, and the snippets of sound are called grains or seeds. And what the program allows me to do is then to rearrange those grains. So what I did was I took a recording from a few years ago, a live recording of a concert I gave, and I put it into the program, and then I made new music from that. And to me, it's in many ways parallel to the process of working with the ads, because with ads, I treat every word as a seed and see what what sprouts from that and see what new meanings sprout. I apply the same process to my own music. And again, to me, it's this feeling of like, well, a few years ago on the concert, somebody could say like, well, like he played the concert, now it's over. But to me, it's like what I played in that concert was both a tree and a seed at the same time. And now, years later, you know, I'm making new music from that. So that's a process I've been doing a lot. And as for inspiration, I take inspiration from many places. My reading, especially, and ideas, and theory, and poetry, and often it feels like my goal in music is to translate certain ideas into sound. But that's a question I could answer for hours, so I will stop here.
For Saidiya, let's see. How do you maintain the energy to write, and especially in these times? You know, what do you harness within you to write? What is what is this energy going towards your audience?
Yeah, I mean, these are such really brutal, hard times. But sometimes I feel just to hold on to, I was going to say hold on to my sanity, but maybe really to hold on to my madness, you know, and to just affirm, I don't know, being a Martian in this world. And so I think it's the language of, you know, the imposed conceptual frame is so asphyxiating, just to kind of the need to break it, right? To just to recalibrate. Because it's, you know, nothing need be this way. but the discourses are so normalizing.
Right.
And so sometimes you know, a writing exercise is just, you know, that reminder that, oh no, this is, you know, this is like a man-made disaster. So it just it's some air within the enclosure.
What are you reading, Saidiya? What you named a few things, the Zakiya Jackson.
The Edwards, you know, all of you, I mean, I think for me, what's so important about what poets do is teach me how to make different thought forms. That the way to think critically isn't dictated by genre. Like I don't even know what I read was. It's not a satire, it's not an allegory, it's not a listicle, but so I think that just what I learned from, you know, poet, theorists, you, Dion, Harriet Narbisi, there's such a rich, you know, there's a treasure trove of work, and that just liberates me as a thinker and makes me feel like, oh, I can just work however I choose to, or what's the form of this thought. Like sometimes one doesn't want, you know, to write a reasonable, well-argued essay. So what is the form of the screed, of the rant, of the rave, right? How do you sound that complaint? So just like Jerome, you are trying to translate ideas into sound. Like I too am trying to do that. Like what is the what is the form for the articulation of this experience, of these thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is perhaps time for one more question. Okay. When creating your projects, how do you go about raising the dead or making space for those who have been dispossessed or disappeared by anti-Blackness without turning them into symbols of your own desire?
Is that for me?
It's actually for both of you, but I think we're going to go to Jerome and Saidiya. So quick, I think we've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is very important, and it's something that I definitely wrestle with very actively in this project I've been talking about. As I said, it for me is an ancestral practice, and for me, one of the ways I approach this question is like really like speaking to them, and like trying to listen to them, and my goal at all times is to, or one of my goals is to honor them and respect them. You know, it's I find it very challenging, and you know, like with the ads, you know, the ad is placed. It's the slaveholder who places the ad, and the slaveholder is writing about our ancestors, and it's a very fine line between subverting the language of the master while respecting my ancestor and our ancestors. So yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing thing for me, and for me, really like listening to Norbesi and reading about how she approached song really helps me, because I feel a kinship in what's happening and the risks involved, as this person says, of turning an ancestor into a symbol.
Yeah. Saidiya, thank you for that. That's really great. Saidiya.
I mean, that's something that I'm always wrestling with, like not, you know, trying to position the dead in service of our romances. I think, you know, my approach is like try to do minimal harm. And I mean, just like, you know, we encounter these presences in this linguistic field, you know, and language is already suffused with so much violence, right? So so what are the ethics of that encounter, and how do I minimize harm? And I think it's about, you know, I don't know, it's active, it's an engagement. It's not like there's an object and a creator. There's like, you know, it's an energetic field that one enters. And I also feel acted upon. I feel like I've been called to do something. And, you know, Norbese said, you know, she's the presumed author of Zong. And I think that presumed authorship is about wanting to be in service of, right? You know, just existing within this larger sociality, in this larger multitude where you're, you know, one of those grains, one of those seeds, but not, you know, sovereign or auteur.
Wow. This is a conversation that could go on, and I hope it will. I hope it will continue.
We have to do our collaborative performance the next time.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Tonight was so powerful. I took lots of notes on Post-its. But the ones that are in front of me now are a great power to being illegible. I love that kind of, it's a double-sided coin, right? The kind of what happens when you're misrecognized in the wrong way, but then there's this other power to being not readable. And Erica, when you were talking about hope and catastrophe, it reminded me of when a bunch of us were invited by our friend Ann Waldman to think through how to grieve and dream at the same time. I've been thinking about that since that invitation years ago. But then it's like, why the grief part? Which brings me to Saidiya's "Nothing Need Be This Way." So I want to thank you all for your for creating new work for tonight. That is amazing. And for creating that new work in conversation with each other's work and the work by our friends from last night, Dion and Harriet. Everyone from around the world, there are folks watching in time zones where they should not be awake. I want to thank those audience members for coming, the CAP team, and invite everyone to come tomorrow night to see the photographer and social practice artist, Jun Lee, who's also a medical doctor, and poet Aristides Girmay. I'll be moderating that panel alongside my colleague, Angie Cruz. So we hope that you'll register for that. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.